Okay, let's give this a go. So, hello, we should now be live. Oh, and we've dropped down to 2 viewers. We had 6 a minute ago, and now
Hi,
they've gone to 2. But let's, hello. So, hi, Yulia. How are you?
good. How are you, Sam?
I'm good. I'm good. So, should introduce yourselves. My name's Sam Machin. I'm a product manager at Vonage, and I work on a lot of the low-code products that we're building. So, I used to work in developer relations, and now I'm a little bit more of a product manager, but still quite hands-on technical. And Yulia?
Hi, I'm Julia. I do work in developer relations. I'm a developer advocate for Nexmo, and Nexmo is now Vonage. I do mostly work on Node-RED and create content for the community around it.
So yeah, so this is a new show we're going to experiment with. First time we've either of us have done anything on Twitch. So I've bought a stream deck, so I know exactly what I'm doing, obviously. But we shall wing it as we go. And yeah, I can see a couple of people on chat. So Lorna's there. Great background. Yeah, what you don't realise is this is a green screen, and mainly because my office is such a tip that if I had to tidy it or just hang a piece of green thing and put an image up. But it's better than tidying. I might turn it off at some point. And you can see the mess. Cool. So let's jump into things, shall we? If I switch over. So what we're gonna talk about. Well, this I should introduce what this content of the show is. So we're calling this the Low Code Hour. It's going to be about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. And really, the stuff that I want to show people is it's sometimes called low code, sometimes called no code. Term we like to use at Vonage is builders. So not everybody is a developer, and the word developer can scare people sometimes because they think they're not a developer, they don't know how to do something, I can't do something. So we use the term builders for anybody that really wants to create something for their own personal use or for small little internal uses at work or maybe something in your home, but they don't think of themselves as a developer. And we're going to show you a whole bunch of applications and tools and things that allow you to build without having to be a developer, without really having to write. I'm not going to say any code because there might be a little bit, but it's like maybe 1 or 2 lines that you put in the middle of something in a tool because sometimes it's just a little bit easier. But wherever possible, we're going to aim to use visual builder tools instead of code. So it's low code, it's not no code. But yeah, I think this is a really exciting kind of growing area. So many people are creating things now with APIs, and there's all sorts of tools. So the first tool we're going to talk about this week is one that I've been working with a lot. We've both been using for must be about 18 months now or so. I think since we started playing around with Node-RED. So Node-RED is this is the website node-red.org, an open source package. It's now the tagline they use is low code programming for event driven applications. It's been through a few different kind of iterations of what they call it. It started off life very much as an Internet of Things application inside IBM, actually. It's got a really interesting history if you go and read the Wikipedia pages and stuff. Kind of started off with IBM as a side project, became an IBM official product, and then transitioned to being open source. So it is 100% open source. It's not owned by IBM. It's not controlled by them at all. The two of the guys who are sort of the lead maintainers, I think their salaries are paid by IBM to work on this, but they seem to have quite a lot of control. And people can take it and do interesting things with it. So I suppose we should talk a little bit about how to get started. I don't want to spend ages covering how you install Node-RED. It's relatively quick and easy. You can run it on all kinds of devices, Raspberry Pis. I've got a couple of them on my desk here. Something like a little Pi Zero like that is perfectly capable of running what we're going to do today. In fact, I should have run this off a Pi. If you go to node-red.org and the Getting Started page, there's a whole bunch of instructions for how to install it, run locally, and then you can install it on your computer. So it's Node.js, if you know that. So you open a terminal and type npm install Node-RED, and it'll install everything. Raspberry Pi is a really good way of installing it. Docker. There's all sorts of other kind of ways of running it in the cloud and stuff like that. For this, we're going to be running it just locally. I'm running on a Mac, but it'll run on Windows or Linux just the same. We're going to use an application called ngrok to help expose things. So if you want to see more about that, I think there's a blog post. Yulia's written a couple of really good blog posts on Node-RED, but the first one on SMS, I think, on our blog talks you through installing it as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so it assumes you've already installed it, but that you can find on node-red.org, and it takes you from that point onward. I'm also going to pop the link for getting started with ngrok in the chat if everyone wants to.
Yeah, is that using
see
the
that.
ngrok node, or is that using the manually?
The node.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm going to show you the node as well because I like it.
I think so. I'm going to double check that.
Yeah. So anyway, once you start up Node-RED, this is what you'd see. In fact, let's just for completeness, I'll explain the concept because I've got it set with a password. You can set up a password on your editor, and you probably should if you're working with webhooks. So that's part of the config file. Again, there's stuff in the docs for that, but I'm going to log into a fresh, clean Node-RED instance here. So this is what it would look like when you first install it out of the box. What you've got is over on the left, that way, forget the screen's moved. On the left-hand side of the screen, as you're looking at it, you've got the palette, as it's known. So these are all the nodes that are built-in functions into Node-RED. These are your kind of core, I guess, programming concepts. Don't think of it too heavily like a traditional programming language because it's a little bit more abstracted and I think easier. But you've got a whole bunch of different things. So you've got some sort of functions that can do things with data, some connectivity nodes for different network protocols. I say it started off with Internet of Things. So you've got like MQTT, which is a really popular thing. Seeing Lorna's no idea why I'm in relation to the screen when I'm streaming. Yeah. It's I can see my stream, so that's me pointing at the web page, isn't it? And on the far side of the screen from me is where the palette is. So all these little nodes down here, I'll come back to those. You've got your main canvas area on the center here where you can drag stuff in, and you just drag them from the palette onto there, and it creates an instance of the node. And you've got a kind of informational panel over here on the right, and this will change based on what you've got. So if you bring a node in there, it shows you information about it. The help is quite useful. It tells you what the node can do and various parameters, things like that. There's also this debug up here, which if you switch on debug, that's a bit like the equivalent of your console log in JavaScript or print in Python or anything like that. And you've got these green debug nodes you can always drag into your flow. So a really simple node would be I'm going to inject a timestamp, but I could change what that might inject, and I'm just going to log it back out. Similar to Scratch, board builder. Absolutely, I sometimes use the term Scratch for grown-ups because it's a little bit more. But Scratch is a low-code builder application. At some point, we might try and build something with Nextmo and Scratch. That could be interesting. And so there we go. I injected a timestamp, and it just logs that here on the debug window, and you can see it kind of light up that node to show that's where it's debugging. And I could turn it on and off as well. So if that was off, it wouldn't actually log it. So you can kind of enable and disable your line. So that's your basic kind of concepts of Node-RED. Should have said as well, sorry, when you make any changes, you hit this red deploy button up in the top right. That pushes your changes. So when you're working within Node-RED, you have an editor, which is the front end. It's what's running in your web browser here. And you have a runtime on the back end, which is where the actual code executes and things. So whenever you hit deploy, that pushes stuff up from the editor up to the runtime and actually makes it live. And you can close down the editor and stuff will keep running in the background then forever. So you don't have to have the web page open for it to do things. The editor is just your code editor. Right. So that's the basic principles of Node-RED. I think maybe we should talk a little bit now about what we're going to build today. So the title of this episode is Building a Virtual Church. It's a use case, so I came up with, or actually my wife asked me about a few weeks ago. So like everywhere in the world right now, most people are on some form of lockdown, social distancing, staying at home, not going out, which for those of us that have worked from home for years just seems normal. But lots and lots of things are on hold. And my father-in-law is a minister for a independent church up in the northeast of England. Now, obviously, he's got quite an old popular congregation. You know, your classic sort of church congregation aren't typically young, fit, healthy people that, you know, that sit and work on video chat and things like that. but they had to, or they needed to stop holding their in-person services. They kind of started this a little bit before the lockdown kicked in, but also because looking at the population and things and trying to protect them. So, but for these people, this was a big part of their lives. This was their social connection, their community, and all that kind of thing that they lost. So my wife said, what could he do? She actually said originally podcasts. Could he do a podcast of his service, and how could we then send that out to people? But if you think about, a lot of the typical congregation, they maybe don't have, smartphones, computers. They're not very tech savvy. What's the sort of lowest common denominator thing that we could set up? So a conference call. Everybody has a phone, even if it's a basic, something something like this, your old-fashioned banana phone, or this is a modern version, but a very basic non-smartphone. They just need to call a phone number. So even an old-fashioned rotary phone. Which, do you remember those, Julia? Or,
yes, I do.
Okay. I don't remember quite how. I know I'm old enough to remember rotary phones and then have a certain retro chic, but this is absolute lowest common denominator. If you've got a rotary phone wired into the wall, still screwed into terminal somewhere, you can still access this. So this isn't your video conference, VR, blah blah blah. You need broadband stuff. So what we're going to build is a conference calling application using the Nexmo Voice API. And we're going to build in a couple of features and bits and pieces that kind of fit the use case of in this case, a church service. Actually, that's kind of anything. Really, it's the same for an all-hands company call or something, or any scenario. So I often when we talk about like meeting tech and things and conferencing, I always think it's best to rethink back to real life. How do meetings work in the real world? And in the real world, you've typically got two sorts of meetings or connections with people. You've got 5 or 6 people sat in a room all around a table together, where everybody's just talking and it's an open thing. And then you've got the kind of thing which is more of a presentation, where you've got one person stood up perhaps on a stage with a microphone and a large number of people in an audience. And those are very different. If anybody's been to one of those sort of more corporate presentation type of meetings, they're very different ways of working. In a 6-person sitting-man room, everybody can talk because people self-discipline and keep themselves quiet. If you try and do that with 25, 50, 100 people on an open conference call, then chaos ensues. And I'm sure people have probably experienced that. So we need some kind of audio controls to allow you to say, this is the person who's speaking, and everybody else can hear, but is muted. But then also, especially perhaps in a church service or something like that, or a good thing, you want at some point everybody joins in. You open it up, and maybe you're singing a hymn, maybe they're praying, maybe you're kind of opening up to Q&A or something like that, where you want to be able to unmute the rest of the audience or the congregation and allow everybody to speak. So we need to build in some control and some stuff for that. So let's dive in, shall we, and start installing stuff. That sounds like Alexa is getting triggered outside. I thought I'd muted the one on my desk, but there's too many echoes in my house that will trigger. So we're going to, first of all, on a stock clean Node-RED instance, we need to install our packages, just like any application. So we do that from this top menu up here, and we go down to Manage Palette, the palette being your collection. This is what I currently have installed. This is just the default. And I can go to install and search. So the first thing we want is the Nexmo package, 330. So this is the latest one that's got I think I've shown you the new edit application. You can change the webhooks. Did I show you that? We put in the other week. Yeah.
No.
We'll try it. It might work. I've created a new node that allows you to change the webhooks for an application or for an SMS.
Oh, it's in the Electron app.
Yeah, in the Electron app, and also it's in the regular 330 package. So that's installed a whole bunch of new nodes for the Nexmo package, which you'll now see. There we go, down the bottom here. We'll come on to these, but these are the 2 new ones, Julia. The grey update application and update number ones, so you don't have to go to the dashboard always to do things. There's a couple of other things we're going to want. We're going to need ngrok. because, so those that don't know, ngrok is a service, a really cool little service that allows you to take your local machine, your laptop or whatever that is that's running at home on your broadband connection behind a NAT and a firewall and that kind of stuff. But then you can't trying to kind of receive webhooks from that and make your computer a server on the internet is a little bit fiddly. You have to faff around with routers and stuff. What ngrok does is it tunnels out from your computer to a server. I think it runs in Amazon or something in the cloud somewhere, and they open up a web server for you on a custom URL. That means that requests can be sent to that web server and then sent down the tunnel to your local application. So it's a really, really useful tool for that. And it just so happens there is a ngrok package for Node-RED as a set of nodes, which I wrote on my weekend because I do stuff like that. But it's ngrok is actually like a binary application that you can just run on your machine, but this is a wrapper around it. So we'll get the ngrok nodes. And also, if we have time, we're going to try and do the dashboard. So let's put the dashboard nodes in. The dashboard is a set of, there we go, Node-RED dashboard, Node-RED nodes which let you create UIs. So this view you're seeing here is the editor, which is very visual, but isn't normally what you would want to kind of expose a user interface for like giving somebody a control panel. Or maybe displaying stuff. So like I say, it started off with Internet of Things. So if you want to do like dials and gauges and numbers or anything like that, then you can do all of that with the dashboard nodes. So we have all our nodes in. Cool. Let's start off building a basic voice application then. So what do we need to start with? It's a little bit of a reverse thing here because the way Nexmo works with Voice API is we use this concept of applications, which is like a config bundle. And I'm going to bring in in this case, I'm going to use the create call node, just because it's the top of the list. We'll then delete it. But this will allow me to create a application. And that application will then be my config bundle. So if I open up the create call node, when you open up a node, you get this little editor on the side, and it asks you to put in settings for it. The one we're interested in here is this add new Nexmo voice app. And we're going to open that up, and this is a config node, and create our Nexmo application. So I'm going to call it Twitch Church. I need to put in my Nexmo API key. It's 84A24B1, which I don't need to tell you is a secret. And then I've got a little function here, which will, I don't have to worry about showing you my secret because I can temporarily set it to password 123. And I'm just going to set for now the URLs to example.com because we can change those in a minute programmatically. So that's going to create a new application when I tap create application here. There we go. We've got a private key generated. So this app ID and key, you won't be able to see the rest of the key, but I won't show you that because that will stay, are used for authenticating calls to the voice API and also gives us our application. I'm now going to click add. It is, Lorna. Yeah, I can show you. This is a temp secret script. So it is password 123 for about another 10 seconds, and then it'll automatically change back because I have a little script which temporarily changes my password to password 123 just for demos and then changes it back to what the real password is. So I don't have to worry.
Also, if you're following, then you can find your API key and secret on your dashboard.
Yes, sorry, good
point. Which I'm gonna put the link for in there.
Yeah, so yeah, on the dashboard, and if I go to home, it'll, if I sign that one, it will show you, oh, it's logged me out, of course, that's always useful. Let's log back into the dashboard. Yeah, your API key's there, and I won't mouse over the secret, but you can show the secret there. For some of us who've linked the secret, I think I did share it, Alex. It's on a gist somewhere in the Slack if you look. But yeah, I'll send it to you later. I put it in my path, so I can literally just type temp secret in a terminal, and it changes it. It says temp. You can choose what you want it to be changed to, and times, and all kinds of things like that. But, Cool. So we've now got our Twitch Church application created there. In fact, I'm going to delete this create call node because we're not going to use that. What we are going to do is we're going to set up a incoming voice webhook. So this is the endpoint which Nexmo will make the request to when somebody calls our phone numbers. In that case, we're going to call it, it's going to make a get, and it's just going to be, we're going to use the usual kind of default dimension of /answer. So we need get /answer. Then what do we want to do with our call? So Nexmo has this concept of NCCOs, which is a Nexmo call control objects, and these are the dark green nodes, which are the actions you can take on a call. So the first thing we're going to say is we're going to do a talk, which is our text-to-speech node, and we're just going to say, welcome to the, if I could type, the Twitch Church virtual service. I'm going to use the voice name Emma because I like that name, and it's a British voice, and we'll leave the others off. We don't need to talk about these barge in and loop. So what Node-RED does that's quite nice, we've mapped all of the different options you can use in the API. If you look at the documentation, let's start out. Oh, it's got a URL in it. I don't know what Lorna's on about. All the options on an NCCO are kind of exposed in the editor here, but you can just leave most of them set as defaults. And it's a little bit of an explanation, and even I think it'll take you to a new window, a link to the right page in the documentation, which explains what they all are. So all the options that you would set in the code are the same here: text, barge in, loop level, voice name, text, voice name, slightly in order, but they're kind of there. So you can set any of those options if you want to on anything, but we'll just use a basic text there. Then we're going to drop this into a conversation. Conversation is the term we use for conference. Your curl command? Oh, is that on the docs? Maybe, yeah. So conversations are our conferences, and a conference has a name. That name is unique to, I can never remember if this is to your application or to your account. I think it's application level. Certainly to be safe, assume that you're always going to use the same application name. I can't think where you'd normally want to be using different. I have no idea what Lorna and Alex are talking about, do you?
No, not really.
Anyway, so yeah, the conference name we're saying you want to set that up to be whatever we're going to call this. So we're just going to call our conference Twitch. And we're going to use a music on hold URL, which I will set. So this is some of the more advanced features. So what we can do is we can set up a URL. I'm just going to make it easy. To a file I'm hosting on S3, which is an MP3. If I don't set start and answer and end on exit, what that means is when somebody comes into this conversation, the conversation itself the conference won't have started until it's been until somebody comes in that has a start flag set on them. So actually, this conversation will never start. It will just hold them and play this music on hold URL. And we're not going to worry about recording for now, but you could also record the conversation. So we've got our conversation node. The final thing we need to do with our NCCO stuff is we need to close it off with a return NCCO action. And then we can join everything up. And hopefully, there we go. We've got our action, which I think now, if I try and just load in a browser, we'll probably, yeah, you return, let's change it to, well, you can see there, that's the, I can't see it, probably easier on that one. That is the NCCO. NCCO is a JSON object that I'm serving up on /answer locally, which is, kind of useful. Can I make the font bigger? Yes, Lorna, I probably can. It's honest answer? Maybe not. Let's see what controls in. There we go. Yeah. So there you can see it's basically just returning a whole bunch of JSON, either in hard like that. Things. You don't need to worry too much about that with all this low-code stuff, but I thought it might be useful, just interesting to show you what it's doing. So the problem is that that's only working on my machine here, but isn't available on the internet. So we need to use ngrok. In fact, let's do all this on one tab, shall we? Yeah. So I'm going to bring in the ngrok node. Ngrok, we can set up things like auth, but we don't. We'll just run this on the free plan for now. I know my port is 1880. It's just what Node-RED runs on. You'd see that in here. We can leave most things as default, I think, but I'll set them just to be sure. US region and HTTP. I have to send some control nodes. At some point, I really should add to the ngrok a button that turns it on and off instead of having to inject these. But we can send a couple of messages into ngrok called on or off, which unsurprisingly turns it on or off. So I'll set these to inject a string of on and a string of off. And let's just log out what it does as well for now. So if we deploy that, yes, it'll tell me because I haven't set a key in ngrok, but that's fine. If I send an on into the ngrok node, fingers crossed, there we go. Yes.
Can you zoom into Node-RED as well?
Yes. Let's make, how's that? I can make it a little bit bigger, but then I lose a lot of canvas. So is that, if you try running, you may be watching full screen, Lorna. But what you see under here is you've got the URL that ngrok has given us. So this is this random temporary URL that's been assigned. And if I disconnect and reconnect, we'll get a different URL. So that one was, there we go. It's using lots of numbers today. Sometimes they're letters, sometimes they're numbers. Now, what we have is this new update application node. We can use this one to cunningly collect our Twitch Church application that we created and update that with the URL that Node-RED that ngrok gives us. But we also can use this templating stuff. So you see these little brackets here. This uses something called mustache templating, which allows us to use a value that's in the message. Theatre mode for the win. So the URL, we can take the value of, in this case, you can see what the ngrok node is chucking out, message.payload. Let's just see if I make that a little bigger. No, get my scrolling wrong. Message.payload is the value that it's throwing out of the ngrok node, and that contains my URL. And I can use that message.payload. Let's just return that to normal. Inside brackets, message.payload, and there's no slash on the end, so I can do slash answer. And similarly, my event URL slash event. So now this node will update the Twitch Church application answer URL and event URL with whatever ngrok sends out as its URL slash answer and slash event. If I deploy that, oops, no, I don't want to do that yet. I want to join that one up to there, and actually just, it's probably useful to, running out of space on me, to allow it to tell us what the output of the update application action is. So if I do that, if I now, I'll probably have to turn it off, it'll do nothing. And if I turn it on, fingers crossed. Ooh, I got an error back from Nexmo. I don't know why that is, because it's using the secret, which I set to a temporary one. Let's try again. There we go. And so that's updated capabilities, voice, webhooks, event URL, and is now our ngrok URL. So now our application is pointing at whatever ngrok is using on this slash answer, which is rather cool. The other thing we now need to do is we need to go into the Vonage dashboard, and we need to set up some phone numbers. So remember, I go to applications, and there's my Twitch Church application, and link some phone numbers. Now, 44745. I purchased a couple of numbers previously. So I've got two numbers. I'll show you what we're going to do with each of those, but I'm going to link both of those to this application now. So 7451, 285 120 and 285 121. So those are linked, and hopefully we're ready to go. In fact, I'll just add a debug in here, so you can see you can have multiple things. So this will just log whatever comes out this answer one, just so I can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So if I bring the nodes closer together, that's probably easier to see than everything going on. Okay, let's deploy that. So in fact, Yulia, have you got the phone number there? Should we try?
Yes. Should I be muting myself?
No, it should be fine.
Okay.
Just put it. If you might want to put it on speakerphone.
Right.
So you can.
Check the virtual service.
And there we go. It'll play the music. Cool. So you can hang that up because it won't go very far. But there we go. So we have now. Yulia was called in. It played that welcome to the Twitch virtual service. It answers very quickly. So you put it on speakerphone. You missed the first bit, but we heard the bit say something about virtual service. And then it dropped you into that conversation, but with music on hold. And I logged out payload, but it wasn't payload because it's something else. But I got something coming off there, so I knew that worked. So what we're now going to do is, you saw I picked up two numbers, and this is kind of useful because what we need to do is we need to have the two different numbers for the two different ways people can call in. So we have one number that we're going to give to our congregation, and we have one number for our minister, for our presenter. And when the congregation dial in, they're all going to come in and just be put into this hold music. And then when the minister dials in, it will move everybody into the shared conversation, and they'll be able to hear him. And it'll open up the conference. Sometimes called a chairman on a conference call, or a moderator, or a host, or whatever. And some applications do this with like dialing in different pins or anything like that. But I think it's much nicer just to do it with individual numbers rather than asking people to do things. And again, back to our old-fashioned rotary phones. If you've only got a rotary phone, you can't press 1 after the tone or anything. So what we can do is oops, where's that? Stop, there we go. Delete that one, and I'm going to put in a switch node. So a switch node is it's a little bit like an if statement in programming. This allows us to branch different routes based on a value. I'm going to cheat slightly and look at my one I prepared earlier. So the value that we're going to look at is what's coming off this previous node. So coming off the answer node is a value message.call, and that's message.call.2 is the number that was dialed. So if message.call.2, the number called was 4474512852120. That's the number you called, wasn't it, Julia? 120?
Yes, it was.
Yep. Cool. So 120 will do one thing, and we want another branch, which if they call the other number, is 121. Oh, and here comes a dog. I think I got the camera right, so you can't see him down here. So we've got two branches, and what we see now is we get these two little nodes off here because we can take two different paths. So we come into the switch node, and then we say, right, if it's 120, we're going to go into this path here, which does the conversation as we previously expected. But if it's 121, we want to do something a little bit different. And what we're going to do is, in fact, yeah, I'll do it. I know, but the table's like my desk's raised up, Lorna. I can't pick him up; he's heavy, and he'll kick somebody. Maybe if Gizmo comes up, we'll get him. So we're going to play a different message. We're just going to say, "Welcome to the virtual service. You are in caster mode." We use the same voice name. Emma. And equally, we're going to do another conversation node. So I talked before about the names we use the conversation. So we're using the name of this conversation is Twitch, but we didn't set the start on answer. For this one, we're going to say put them into the same named conversation, which is Twitch, but we do want to start an answer, and we don't need a music on hold because he's going to start the conversation. So we'll link those up. And so if it's that number that they called, we'll play a different message and we'll join and start the conversation. And we can actually point that off to the same return NCCO. It doesn't really matter. You can use the same or different ones. Whatever makes your layout look cleaner, I tend to find. I'm just going to put that debug in here again, but I'm going to change it so that we look at what's in message.call. So I said that was the value we're inspecting. Okay, if you want to call again, Julia, so if you want to call in and put it on speakerphone.
Same number, right?
Same number, yep. Yeah, you're going to call that one. I'm going to call the other number, 451.
Welcome to the Twitch Church virtual service.
So you're getting music. Cool. So you're getting music, and now I'm going to call in on the other number. Which is
The virtual service you are in touch.
and now, yep, we're connected.
Yes.
Cool. So when I dialed in, it played me the greeting, and then it connected. It ended Julia's hold music, and she could hear me. So there we go. We have a basic kind of conferencing setup with two different numbers, depending on who calls in, whether they get put into the audience group or group. The problem we have is that we're not muted. None of the mutes controls there. So everything was open and you could hear me and I could hear you. And that works with two of us. But if we got, all 20 people or whatever are watching now to dial in and all do that, it would just be chaos when we're trying to talk and things. So we need to introduce some mute controls. Now this is where it's going to get a little bit more complex. So what we're going to use, we have the nodes that allow us to mute individual call legs. But there's a couple of weird quirks here. So because you're parked, if you like, when you're listening to that hold music, +1 for doggy cam. I need to get another camera. I'll just attach a GoPro to him and let him wander around the garden or something. Because you're parked, when you're transferred into the conversation, your mute settings are lost. So we need to apply those mute settings when we open up the conversation. So to do that, we need to keep a list of all the different call leg UUIDs. In fact, this is probably a good time to look at the data you get coming in. So I think I need to zoom this a bit more. I'm always going the wrong way. So what we had here is these two debug messages. These were the two calls. I'll use mine so you don't see the phone numbers. But this is what comes in when a call comes in. So we get the number that was called, the number that was calling. That's my phone number. Then we get what we call the conversation UUID. We don't worry too much about that. And the regular UUID. The regular UUID is the call leg. So that's the one that identifies me as a caller versus each participant. So that can be thought of as our participant ID. So that's the one we're going to be interested in working with. So message.call.uuid. So let's clear that out. And
Sam, would you like to touch a bit on context?
sorry?
Context and the structure of the message object, and then flow and global?
Yes, so we will do, yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to store these. So these are what's coming in message object, yeah. So a message is something that flows through the flow in Node-RED. Flow is a really odd term because it can be used in two different terms. But when something happens, the call comes in and hits this answer, or the request from Nexmo comes in, hits this answer, and each node outputs a message object to the next node, which does something with the data in that message object. Maybe it changes it, maybe it reads it, maybe it switches based on a value in it. Maybe it appends something to it and passes it on. So what we do in these ones is we're switching based on it here, and then here we're starting to build a new message object that tells us what we're doing. Did we update the what am I doing tag? I I've just seen somebody tag it. I don't think we did we? Maybe. We'll see. P. Copley. We are building a application with Node-RED, which is for conference calling. So, and in this case, it's for joining together a church service. Oh, cool, we did. I can't remember. I thought we talked about it, and then I suddenly had a panicking message that we didn't. So sorry, the message flows through between the nodes this way, and eventually outputs. So that's your message context. You also have two more contexts: a flow context, which is where you can store data that's persistent across the flow, which is the tab. So you can see we can actually create multiple tabs in Node-RED at the top here. And so you can have data that's only within that flow, and you have a global context, which will be across all the flows. So what we're going to do is we're going to store that call UUID in a flow context when each person comes in. Now this is where we have to do a little bit of code. So I'm going to drag in this function node, and the function node is a JavaScript editor. It allows you to copy and paste, in this case, a small block of code in an X unit. So we're going to use a flow variable called members. So we have this function flow.get members, and if it doesn't exist, we'll create it as a dictionary. And then we're going to set members call the key using the message call UUID and the value being the from number. So we'll have a whole dictionary of UUIDs and call numbers. And then we're going to save it back to the flow variable of members. And we're also then going to output it to do something with it afterwards. So we're going to output message.members equals members and return a message. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to call this add call to members. So we're going to do that as soon as we only want interested in doing this. I've got these the wrong way round. Actually, I'm just going to swap things because otherwise my wiring is going to get really complicated. There we go. So my top path is my host number now. I've just swapped these, but the pastor mode is going to be the 121 number is up here, and the congregation number, because we're going to do more with that, is going to be down the bottom here. You tend to find when you're building with Node-RED, like you sometimes have to rearrange things as you add bits. But we also, so when the call comes in, if it's on that number, we're going to add it to this members object. What we then want to do is, just looking at my notes, we now want to apply the mute setting. So this is where, actually let's take the ngrok stuff and just put it well out the way because we don't really need that for a bit. So we have it added in here. In fact, we can log it out to here, and we're going to log out message.members. So we're just going to keep a list. If I deploy that, now if I'll turn off the message call object. If I call in, actually, if you want to call in as well, Julia.
Sure.
And the same number again, 120.
Welcome to the Twitch Church virtual
Just added one number.
It was not deployed, I think.
There you go. Now there's two in there. So that has two members, which is our numbers and our ID. So there you go. You can hang up. That's fine. So we're now building up our dictionary. I also need, now, just for the purposes of debugging, something to allow me to delete that value. So I can use this change node to say do a delete on flow.members, which just allows me to reset it to 0 while we're testing. What we normally do is we do this on the hang up. Doesn't matter what I'm injecting, but that's just going to delete it. Cool. So that should now reset it, and we won't keep adding ourselves to it every time to clear out our flow context. Okay, what do we need to do next? We now need to do the mute controls. Yeah, this is going to run some time here. So when somebody, normally everybody's in the conversation, but what we want to do is we need to mute them as soon as the main conference starts. So to do that, we're going to trigger this off the pastor number being called here. We're going to add a short delay, 5 seconds, which just gives it time from he connects to when it's actually started, because it plays the welcome thing. So basically when he comes in, actually it'll first connect everybody unmuted, but within a couple of seconds, they'll all be muted. We are going to, I'm just seeing what we're doing in the notes here. Yes, we're going to switch. So we need to do a change node. We need to grab our make the payload flow.member. So we need to go and read our flow variable into payload. And then we're going to split this because we need to iterate over it. So we've got 10, 15, 20, however many people. Where's the split now? I can never find split. Oh, it's here, sequence as well. So we're going to split based on the fixed length of 1, because it's going to be, it's an array of objects, and we're going to copy the key to message.key. So this will take in that flow members as message.payload and as a dictionary or a list of objects, and it will split them down and output a whole bunch. You get one message in and 10 or however many it is out. So we're going to do our split. And now we've got individual values, which should be each of the members of the call. We can call the mute action on each one. I should say, actually, if we were going to, because there's a rate limit on here, in fact, let's just do it properly. The API has a rate limit of 15 messages a second for most of these actions. So we can do, using a delay node, you can apply rate limits. So in this case, we are going to set it to not delay each message, but rate limit to all messages at 15 messages per second. So we're going to limit ourselves to 15, just so we don't kind of get any errors, which means if we've got more than 15 people, it'll take more than a second to mute them, but that's still not too bad. It always takes a couple of seconds to calm the audience down. So we're going to fire off our mute, and in our mute action, we want to say, we're using the same application again, because that's how our control is. We're going to use message.key because we've already split it and stored it in message.key. And the status is we're going to put the mute on everybody. Cool. And then finally, just so we know what's happening, we'll log that out to debug. Okay, so if I zoom out a little bit again, you can see this fairly long path that we're slowly building up. So the call will come in if it's a number on the congregation line. So it will go this way. It will put them into the conversation, which has music on hold set, and it will add their number to this flow list of members. When somebody calls in on the other line, we will play a talk and start the conversation, but 5 seconds after their call has come in, we will also iterate over this list of members and send a mute command to each one. So within a couple of seconds of the thing starting, everybody will be muted. Right, let's try deploying that. Okay, so Julia, if you want to call first.
Welcome to the Twitch Church virtual service.
It takes a second, I think, to pull the music from there. So now you're there. Now, if I call in on pastor number, if you talk quickly, Julia.
Yep. So
And you should.
I can hear you, but probably you are not hearing me.
Yeah, that didn't seem to mute you. I'm not quite sure why. Deployed. Okay, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? So adding to flow members. Members is there. Split function should have done.
So you were going to mute me the moment you joined the conversation, right?
Should have joined you, but then muted you the second I joined. So let's just see what the output of that one is. It should have been message.key. I think you're still in them, so if I call in again, it'll just trigger it. So there's the 5-second delay, the blue node. And now we're going to set. Why is it not picking up that flow.members? Definitely in there. Ah, that's why I was missing a line. Okay, there we go. So that's where the debugs are really useful. You can add a debug and see if it's not getting there. And because I'm using this on such a small space, I was missing a connection. So let's try that again. Okay.
Welcome to the Twitch Church virtual service.
Now I'll call in. We'll see the delay trigger because it'll go blue. Here we go. And now we're connected. Now if you talk, Julia.
Yes, we are connected, and I am muted, supposedly.
I've got you on speakerphone here, but I can't hear you. So you can hear me, but I can't hear you. And if anybody else wanted to call in fact, let's just leave that open. And actually, no, I won't bother calling another one because we haven't set that up yet. But there we go. So we're now muting when everybody joins, which is kind of cool. So you're muted. But obviously, what I then might want to do is I might want to be able to unmute everybody for something. So we now need to build some more controls. And this is where our dashboard stuff will come in. We'll see if we get time for that. But we need to build a similar flow here to grab the list of numbers and mute them. So we'll do it with an inject node. So we're going to create a new flow. We're going to inject. In this case, we can inject the flow.members directly. We can just use the same split function. You can copy and paste from other places in your flow rather than dragging new ones in. We can copy our rate limit in, and then we can copy our mute function in. So that will, in that case, mute everybody. But also we want to do the same, copy multiples, and unmute everybody. So unmute is there. That one's going to unmute. That doesn't update the label. I should fix that. And we'll just log these out again. See what we're doing. We can change the labels here though. So this one, the name is going to be unmute all, and this one is going to be mute all. Okay. So we now have mute controls. Cool. I'm going to clear out the members list again. We should build a handler to remove that. So let's try one more time. If you want to dial in, and I'm going to 2851220, and I'm also going to dial in on this phone.
Welcome to the Twitch Church virtual service.
Oops, that was helpful if I dialed the right phone number. I'm sorry if that was your phone number. 451 should find out who this CD is. It's one of my father-in-law's CDs. There we go. And I'm also hearing the whole music. So we've got two phones dialed in there. Turn it down a little bit, just get loud. And now I'll dial in on the host number. Right, so now we're connected.
Yes, we are.
Yep, but these two are muted, but this one you can hear me on. So now you can hear the pastor phone, but you can't hear the congregation. So if I not put them next to each other because I'll get feedback, send the unmute event in. No, but hopefully, yes. There we go. You can hear on this one. Can you hear me, Yulia?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
I just
So
unmuted it for a second.
everybody's unmuted and everybody can hear everybody. But if I have them both on speakerphone, what will probably happen now is we'll get horrible feedback. And this is why you need mute controls. So I can now mute everybody again, and we're back to just one number being able to hear anybody, and not the other one. So now we have our moderated conference with some mute controls, which is kind of cool. Let's see. So what else do we want to look at? We've got our 2 dial-ins. We've linked our numbers. We've got mute controls. So we really, though, this is kind of cool, but you have to control it from watching Sam like he was using a Victorian phone. Like, yes, the
Hi, Mike.
Victorian iPhone 10R, well known by Victorians. They love their iPhones, the Victorians. Not so big on Android. That was more of an Edwardian thing, I believe. Yeah, I do need a rotary phone somewhere. I've got. You missed it earlier on. I've got this mic, which is my banana phone. That's about as retro as it gets on my desk at the moment, I think. I think there's a DECT phone up there. But always lots of phones here. We should totally. Yeah, eBay, Lorna. Although, or hipsters. That's where you get rotary phones. People that have them ironically in their house, but just as actually a friend of mine, she has one as a purely like decoration. She's not a phone geek or anything. She's just a bit retro hipster, and it's not plugged in. She doesn't even have a phone line at home. She has like cable broadband. But
My dad has one, and unfortunately, it's not for decoration.
cool. I've got one somewhere. Somebody gave me an EMF many years ago. A old East German late 80s. It's button dial, but it's like the kind of Soviet era East German landline phone. But I really should get that working because that's kind of cool. Mike's posting YouTube links. I have no idea what they are. Lorna's on eBay buying phones. Cool. Yeah, let's see how you get that one through expenses. why did you buy a rotary phone? Cool. So we've got about that's kind of our hour, but let's keep going because I think we got a little bit. We said we'd go a little bit over the low code hour being 90 minutes. Let's look at doing some dashboard stuff. So what we've got is we want to create our dashboard so we don't have to come into the editor to toggle these controls, because if I gave my father-in-law this as his interface and he's trying to mute and unmute stuff, it would get a little bit cumbersome. So we can drag in from the dashboard these button nodes, and we're going to use. You might have to correct me here, Julia, because I always get a little bit lost with the groupings. So first of all, we want to create a UI group, which is in a tab. The tab can be we need to create a tab, which we're just going to call home. I'll just use the default.
So there is a default, which is the home. But yeah, you can leave it like that.
That one.
And then the UI group will be the layout.
Is that the column?
On the page.
Yeah, the
yes,
UI group
it
is
is.
the column. Right.
Well, cool. It's the part where it appears.
Name defaults group. What's this? Edit dashboard group. I always get lost in here. I'll just controls. Let's do it, and then we'll may have to go back and change what it is. So I'll create one called controls.
And you can
size the icon. Okay, this is my button. So we want to icon will leave blank. The label is going to be mute all. The color of the background, is it names or hashtags on these? I can't remember.
It works with both.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll just use a
name.
name. So we'll make a red button for our mute. And the thing we're going to send is our flow.members list again, because just like the buttons on the inject node. So we can drag that one into here. We'll copy this and we'll have one that says unmute, and we'll make that a green button. Okay. So we've got those, and hopefully now we can hit deploy. time, I'll clear out the members. And now, if I go to /UI on my Node-RED host, you can't do it. There we go. We have our dashboard being generated. So it uses this kind of bootstrap stuff with our 2 buttons, mute and unmute. In fact, let's see how well this works. I can drag in 2 windows. You can probably see, yes, I can do window over window, and you can see my dashboard controls at the same time as Node-RED running in the background. So should we try that one more time with a call? If anybody else wants to try dialing in, 07 or +44 7451 285 120. Julia can probably put in the chat. So you're dialed in. I can't remember how to call on Android. I'm going to dial that one in. It's that one, so you can see the calls coming in. I'm going to call the control line. And we're connected. But you should be muted, Julia.
Yes, we are connected, but you shouldn't be hearing me.
Yep, I'm not hearing you. So if I send the unmute. And now you talk.
So now I am talking.
Cool, and you can do it. And I can mute you again. And you should be
muted again.
Yep, and you're probably not quite as clear about that, but trust us, it is working as you'd expect. So we've now got our little dashboard with our red and green mute and unmute buttons, which is a much nicer interface. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. Michael is asking whether there is a way to see the GS generated by Node-RED.
Ooh, not really, because it's massive. It's not really designed as a tool to generate the JavaScript that you would pick up and run, because you have the runtime layer, which is executing. So actually, what Node-RED generates isn't this whole flow isn't JavaScript. This configuration is JSON. So if I export it, you can export flows, current flow, as a massive JSON object and copy to clipboard. There we go. Let's go to a little JSON lint viewer, and let's try and make this a bit bigger. So, oops, let's go the wrong way of zooming. So this is what a flow looks like in Node-RED. Every node is an object in your JSON, which has an ID. So they all use these kind of dot formation of numbers. What type of node it is, where on the canvas it is. The coordinates are there somewhere to X and Y, and then the values of it. So these are all your parameters of your nodes that you've set up in each one, and what wires link it to what different nodes, to where it goes next. But it's really, you wouldn't normally read or edit this. This is just a useful way of importing and exporting it and copying stuff between flows. So you can export a node. In fact, if you go to flows.nodered.org, there's a library site of, it's kind of like it's actually backed by gists, but stuff that people have created. So you can see some different flows. So there's a whole load that Julia's created here. Example, receive messages, and there's an explanation, and then there is the actual flow, but you would just copy that and import it into your Node-RED. So you don't generally kind of look under the hood, is the idea. Don't look behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz reference. It's just all magic and held together with string. So no, it's very much what you build in Node-RED. Although we've mirrored kind of the way the API works with our nodes, it lets you explore the API. It's not the sort of tool where you would build in this and then break out into JavaScript. Project Lorna shared, which was, I didn't see what that project was, Michael. Don't know what the project was. Lorna, what was the project you shared? I mean, what's nice is you can prototype. I mean, I actually find I can build just about anything I want to do with a voice API inside Node-RED quicker. Oh, Blockly, yes. yeah, the block is the kind of turns JavaScript into thing. Whereas this is a more of an abstracted view. He's a microbit. Yes, yeah. Blockly is the same thing that Gordon's Esprino stuff uses some of that as well. So that's where you switch between code. This is a complete runtime editor tool. The beauty really of Node-RED to me as well is the palette, is all the different nodes. So if we search, you see right now there's 2,537 modules. So let's say we want to find something for Slack. Type Slack. There's a choice of different Slack nodes, but there's the main Slack node we can link here, and it'll take us to a page that tells us about it. And you've got some Slack nodes which allow you to work with the Slack API, so you can bring Slack in or anything like that. It's the community kind of support for different things. I think another one. I run a whole load of my smart home stuff off Node-RED. So all the lights in my house I can control by shouting at Alexa, and that's all orchestrated by Node-RED running on a little Pi. That's just Pi 4 now. I upgraded it, but on the back of my desk here. So you can orchestrate stuff quite nicely that way. And obviously, we can combine stuff. So you can do things with the voice API. You've got the SMS stuff. We'll come on to that in another episode. Verify. We've got all of our different we've got the main APIs in there. We're still adding stuff to it. Cool. So I think that's kind of the main functionality. There's some other stuff I put in the demo one. So within the dashboard, we've got should we throw in the text description that shows you who's online, who's on the call? It's kind of nice to the dashboard. Julia, what do you think? Should we do the?
Yep, let's give it a
go. So this is a little bit more code, but what we can do is on this add call to members, we can then add another function. So this outputs, this node is going to output message.members as our current list of members. And with this, I'm going to, what am I doing here? Object values members. I'm going to take all the values. So I'm not so interested in the keys because the keys are my call UUIDs, but I'm interested in the phone numbers. So the values are phone numbers. And I'm just going to turn message.payload into a list of the phone numbers. I'm then going to, but I won't do that one because that's a little bit more complex, but this is just going to be list numbers, we'll call it, this little function, and link it up there. And then I'm going to put this into a dashboard node, which is a text box. Now then, let's see how we did this. So I did a different control for this, which is going to be, I'm going to call it members, yes. So I'm going to have another column on the thing, which gives us a list of members. Let's just do it that way for now. I have got another node that does some formatting on it, but that's a little bit more complex. So if I just do that and hit deploy, go back to my UI. Oh, there we go. Okay, I haven't noticed it, but what is members appearing there? Should have appeared.
The label was text.
I got it wrong. I told you I'm not. You're far better at the dashboard. Yeah, label. Sorry, the label should be members. So actually, it's members. I thought that should be in a different column to in the same tab, but a different column to controls. Or did I just?
So you called the group members, and then again, when you put the text in there, it's going to have a label.
I meant to create a new group, and I changed controls. That's what I did wrong. Yeah, so I've moved on two groups, one called controls with my button and one called members with my list of members in. So I'll just change there we go. Change the buttons to be like that. So now, there we go. So now I've got two lists. So at the moment, you can see it's just dumping out the list of phone numbers who've dialed into it, and I'm not cleaning up. But you could run another function. I was using some JSON ATA which I think is probably something to cover on another time, but I'll paste it in. We can do some formatting on that so that it looks a little bit cleaner. We can do that. I think it's a change node. Set message.payload to this expression, and then I'm going to use this little snippet here, which is going to run a map over the payload, take each value, slice off the 44 because the international, and add a 0. So we turn the number back into UK format, and add a BR line break so that it just makes them into a list. We'll put all of this on flows.node-red or something afterwards, so you can copy it and see what's going on. But I think you may need to call in again to refresh that. There we go. Bang. And the numbers are now a little bit cleaner. Why was there in that text?
The label inside the text.
Actually, we don't need a label because it's the name of our group anyway, so we can just leave it blank.
Yep.
Somewhere, I think it's that one. Label that. That's the one I wanted. The layout was to be as a column. There we go. So now we've got our list of phone numbers that are on our call. The only other thing we want to do normally is when somebody hangs up, we want to remove them from that list of members. So we can do that with our event. So you remember when we created our application right back at the beginning? Somewhere, if we come into the update application, we have these two URLs. We have the answer URL, which is what happens when somebody calls it. We have this event URL, which is another handler. This is where events are sent to from the voice API. So when certain things happen, like a call changes state, a call is answered, a call is hung up, all of those kind of things. And you don't really have to deal with those if you don't want to, but they are kind of useful in showing you what to do. So if we handle the event with I believe it's a get, yes, /event. We'll just do a plain HTTP handler for this because it's nothing special. I'm just going to look at my notes. I want to say if message payload status is completed. So we're going to switch message.payload.status equals completed, which is the status you get when a call is completed, always hung up. So we'll filter out those. What we can do is you've got this useful feature where you can add another one that just says otherwise. So that's your kind of if-else type of statement. So if it's not completed, we'll just log it out to here. But if it's completed, we then need another little bit of JavaScript node to remove it from our members list. So very similar to what we did before. We're going to get the flow of members list, but instead of adding it, this time we're just going to delete it and store it back into the members flow variable. So that's going to go to there. Delete member note for that one. And then finally, what we actually need to do, this is going to look a bit weird, but we want to fire it back up into here so we update our list of text things. So I'm just going to make a horrible thing and cross the streams, which is a really old reference that I bet nobody gets what crossing the streams is. Julia? No. The original Ghostbusters film?
I was really, really young when I've seen.
I was probably too young to watch it, but I loved it. But somebody once described it to me as Ghostbusters is the original startup movie. Everyone thinks it's The Social Network, the first story about a startup. Ghostbusters is the original startup film because it's 4 guys doing a startup. Their startup was catching ghosts. I think it was 1984. When did Ghostbusters come out? If in doubt, go to Wikipedia.
I definitely did not watch it when it came out.
It looks really dope. There's a new one coming out this year, supposedly. 1984, yeah. yeah, I was. So I would have been about. I can't have watched it when it first came out then, because I would have only been like 3 then. But yeah, Ghostbusters, 8th of June 1984. Anyway, there was a whole thing about crossing the streams. Never cross the streams because that would be very bad. Please, somebody that's watching, tell me that you get that reference, and I'm not that old. This should be called the Retro Hour. Rotary phones, old 80s films. Anyway, so there we go. We're going to delete that, and we're going to fire that back into this thing, which slices up the numbers and updates our list. So if I clean up there, deploy it, hopefully. And why is that not gone clean out of there? Oh, there we go. Fine. Just one in there now. Okay. Oh, the black and white version of Ghostbusters from the 50s. There was a previous Ghostbusters. No, I thought it was the film was. Okay, even more retro than me. Are you thinking of Batman, Michael? There was a black and white Batman. Or the 60s. Okay, sarcasm. Yeah, I'm old. So as numbers, so I think are you connected at the moment, Julia?
I did hang up.
Okay, why didn't it delete you? Oh, I don't know whether that was an old record. Let's try this one for me.
Try again.
Oh, I keep dialing this person's number. I get the code wrong. I'm sorry if your mobile number is 07415. You're probably not watching this. The chances are. There we go. That one's 994474 is my test phone. So I'm dialed in. I'm connected. If I hang up, it doesn't delete me. That's really annoying. Why is that not deleting? So get.
I have a feeling it deleted, except it doesn't refresh the text part.
It should do. No, I've just realized I'm not. I forgot to return a response to my event, but that shouldn't have stopped it triggering. But that would have upset Nexmo because I wasn't closing off my HTTP request with a response there. So message.payload.status. I probably spelled completed wrong or something. Let's have a look at my calls completed. Into delete number. Message.payload.uuid. Let's see what it.
Debug after delete.
Oh yes, yeah. I was just going to put a debug there and see what it sends. Let's clear out the list of numbers. I'll call in on this one. Okay, so that's me being added, and you can see it's on the add there. And if I hang up, I don't think we're getting events. Let's have a look at ngrok. So ngrok has this really useful debugger built in. That's why, because it's sending a post, not a get, and I'm handling a get. So the ngrok debugger is on port 4040 on your local machine, and that shows you all the requests that have come in, and you can inspect them and see what the response was and things like that. So that's not really a Node-RED thing, that's just an ngrok. Yeah. Sorry, I was, yes, it should be a post here. Sorry.
And then you can replay it from ngrok?
I could, you're right, I could replay it from ngrok, but I've just cleared everything out, so. So let's just do it the proper way. So that should be showing empty. Okay, you call in. I think that's because I've got a. There we go. It's updated to just your number, and I'll call in. And I'm there.
And now I'm gonna hang up.
Yay! You disappear.
Oh.
And I disappear. So there we go. That works.
Perfect.
Now. Cool. And we're about there. So, that's pretty much it. So we've got our moderated conference. We've got 2 different numbers. Obviously, this kind of relies on you keeping that second number that starts the conference private to whoever you want to be able to start an event. But that's a bit like giving somebody the keys to your meeting room or your hall or wherever you're going to meet somewhere. So you can tell a whole bunch of people, call this number when you kind of come in, and you can tell whoever's your organizer, call this number when you want to start it. I should point out what I'll do here is at the moment it will start when the host dials the number, but if the host disconnects, it'll leave everybody else connected. You could set this end on exit flag so that actually when the host left, it automatically ended the call for everybody else. But it's kind of nice to leave it open a little bit rather than just killing anybody off if they were in the middle of a conversation. But you can experiment with all these kind of values. And so we've used our dashboard. We've got some controls to mute and unmute and to list who's on there. So actually you can see now from I think my father-in-law uses an iPad. So I believe he stands at the kitchen counter with the phone on like a headset to doing his service. And my wife said it was really weird when he first doing it, he had nobody to talk to. And he's used to talking to a congregation of 20, 30 people. And he was talking to an empty room. So now apparently they get the cats in. And he had the cats as his two sort of virtual audience. We can pretend. I'm not sure what these cats are thinking about it, but it's a weird time. Anyway, so he has the iPad and he can see. So at least then with the numbers, he can see how many people are dialing in. I listened to one of his services and he said, it's really nice to see so many phone numbers connected rather than to see so many of you here. Yeah, you see, dogs are generally a little bit better as an audience, but you just keep throwing them treats. But that's the same with talking to a real audience. If you throw sweets at them, keep them engaged. So anyway, yeah, we've built our dashboard. We've got our call controls. We've got our hold music. What else did I do on the final one? That's about it. Oh, and I added some recording, but we can maybe talk about recording conversations another time. The recordings were really just for me to debug it. You just set in the conversation, whether you want it to be recorded, and it'll at the end of when the last person's left the conference, it'll send you a webhook with saying, here's the recording. So I could just hear what was going on. And also we've talked a little bit about using ngrok and the update application. So that's it really for this one. It was quite a big application, but I think it's kind of a nice one to talk about at the moment because like the current, everybody's building things to help people stay at home, and that's why I built this one. So that's why I wanted to talk about this as a first off. Couple of things I should mention. So first of all, if I switch to this one, coupon code. So if anybody wants to have a go with Vonage APIs and they haven't tried it out, you can use Twivon, TWIVON 072. That's 3 numbers on the end, 072, and that will give you €10 of free credit. So you can try this out. Let's come back to us. You can obviously go to nodred.org to download Node-RED. We've got a thing we've been working on, the Electron app. So me and Yulia have started kind of packaging up Node-RED to run as a desktop app with the ngrok and stuff in there, which maybe we'll talk about on a future episode, because that's again a really easy way to get started with stuff. What are we going to talk about next? Now, I'm not going to say next week. It's not next week. It's in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks' time.
In 2 weeks. If I say next week, I mean next fortnight, which will really confuse the American viewers. But what are we going to talk about next time, Julia? Can you?
Zapier, which rhymes with happier.
Yes. Everyone else calls it Zapier, and I call it Zapier. So a completely different technology, but again, still in the low-code space. Kind of the other end, maybe, of the scale in terms of complexity. Zapier is a little bit, it's a hosted service and it's a little bit more lightweight. But we're going to build a few zaps, as they're called, for connecting stuff. I've just ordered a coloured light bulb to try and integrate that. So we'll do some like call notifications and more stuff. If it rhymes with happier, you're right. It should have 2 P's, I suppose, shouldn't it, then, Lorna? Yeah. But okay, yeah, it's English. Every rule in English, there's about 4 rules that break the other rule. That's the only rule of English. There are no rules. So yes, next week is Alex and Lorna doing their developer drop-in. I have no idea what they're talking about, but if you can hear me on this, Lorna, I'll give you 5 seconds to tell me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the problem with trying to interact with the stream. There we go. We will be downloading voicemail recordings, Alex. Hopefully your own voicemails, because people get into trouble for downloading voicemails. So I think what you did last week, you built the voicemail, didn't you, last week? So yeah, oh, that's cool. So you're going to talk about recordings. Yeah, go Lang and Nelify and anything else we managed to include in our tangent. So yeah, recordings, again, it's handling recordings for conversations or handling recordings for voicemail are exactly the same. So we can do that. Cool, so that's 90 minutes. We didn't break anything, we didn't swear, we didn't show all our API keys, so I think we went quite well. Cool, thank you very much, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Great. Thank you, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.